You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today I'm talking with Kim Lehal, partner and head of international children at RWK Goodman. And it probably won't surprise you to know we're talking about some of the work that you do, Kim, in working with cases around international children. Thank you very much indeed for joining the podcast.
You're welcome. I'm very excited to be here.
In the first instance, it's always useful to get a bit of a feel for who you are and what you do. So perhaps you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself, please.
Yes, of course. So I am a family lawyer who specialises in children. So in cases involving children, predominantly international child abduction, cross-border children issues. So for example, if one parent lives in another country and they want to have a relationship with their child who's here, or if a parent is living here and their child is living abroad and they want contact with their child. In relation to relocation, where a parent on separation wishes to relocate with a child to a foreign country, cross-border adoption, enforcement of foreign orders in this country, and also surrogacy arrangements. So anything to do with children, any conflict to do with children, that's what I specialise in.
Really useful, thank you. So tell me about how you kind of developed this speciality. We were chatting before we started recording, you were saying you've done all your seats while you were doing your training contract, and obviously family must have been a bit of a passion for you at that point.
So how I fell into family law is that during my training contract, I did 3 seats. I did 2 non-contentious seats in residential conveyancing and in wills, trust and probate. And then I'd done my family seat first, and then I came back to it. I spent 15 months in family, and then by the end of my training contract, I'd already established a caseload in family, predominantly children, but mixed. So I was fortunate enough that my training principal at the time, she did all aspects of family law. So she did divorce and finances, public law children and private law children work. So I gained experience in all aspects of family law. And it was legally aided, so I learned how the legal aid system works, as well as privately funded work. So it was varied in every sense, commercially, as well as in terms of the work. And I think, and I know this now over the years, is that naturally I think people tend to lean towards one more than the other. So even if they're doing a mixed bag of everything, I think you're either a bit more children or you're a bit more divorce and finance. And I was leaning towards children. And at the end of my training contract, one of my cases was a children law case where the parents had a dispute over the contact arrangements for their child, and the father actually absconded with the child. And from there, I mean, I was quite junior at that stage. And when the child went missing, it was shock horror. Uh-oh, what do I do? Because I hadn't come across this. Child abduction wasn't something that the firm that I had trained with, they were experts on. Mm-hmm. My training principal at the time, she had done some abduction work. And I remember walking into her office and saying, he's disappeared with the child. I don't really know what to do. And she looked at me and she went, oh, dead calm. It's a High Court application. Off you go. And that was it. So from there, I had to unravel what I had to do to try and get this child back. So ended up issuing proceedings in the High Court, instructing counsel who were experts in child abduction so that I could learn as we went along, as quite often you do, often end up doing, you learn on the job. And so we were in the High Court making application after application for disclosure orders to try and find out where this child was. And in the end, we did, because we managed to get orders against the grandfather who disclosed where the child was. And thankfully, the child was in England on a canal boat. And we successfully returned the child to her mother. So it was incredibly rewarding. It was hard work and it was a lot of learning in a short space of time. After that, I thought, you know what, I really enjoy this. I've really enjoyed this case. and it's something that I wanted to pursue. And from there it snowballed. I then became accredited by the Law Society in children or in child abduction. I still carried on dabbling a bit for a few years because I still really enjoyed doing financial remedies work. The forensic side of it can be quite interesting. And then I changed firms after that, and they encouraged me to pursue a specialism. And I chose children and international child abduction, and I haven't looked back since. It's really interesting and it's really rewarding. And as I said, you do tend to lean towards one, and I did. It was children.
And you were saying that they're quite quick cases to resolve as well.
They are, because if you think about the urgency, if you've got a child that's missing, they're either going to still be in the country in hiding, or they will have left the country on a flight, on a boat. The sense of urgency, it does mean making emergency applications, going before the High Court applications judge on a daily basis sometimes to get orders, disclosure orders. And once you've got disclosure back, in terms of moving the case forward, it is very fast paced. I mean, in a Hague Convention abduction can be finished within 6 weeks. So if you've got a country that's signatory to the Hague Convention, you issue your proceedings, and strictly speaking, within 6 weeks, that case should be finished from start to finish, and an order should be made as to whether that child's been returned or not. Whereas the non-Hague Convention country abduction cases can take a lot longer. They can take years because it's more of a welfare-based analysis. Whereas in Hague Convention, there's strict laws that we need to comply with, and it's completed very quickly. So it depends on which country it is and the nature of the abduction. But yes, it is fast.
And how do cases typically come to you? I mean, you obviously recognise as a specialist yourself now. I mean, are you referred work by other firms as well as people coming to you directly?
So sources of work mixed, I would say. So by virtue of being accredited and having done so many of these cases, I'm on the Ministry of Justice, so the International Child Abduction and Contact Units list of lawyers. So they're based in London. My firm is on the lawyers listing as a result of me being an expert in this field and being accredited. So any incoming cases that come into the central authority are then allocated to the lawyers on that list on a rota. And then everything else is word of mouth. It's through cross referrals from other lawyers. So lawyers who are either in this area of the law, or lawyers who don't necessarily have the expertise and the competence in this area of the law. And then generally through social media, the website, from blog writing, I had an article in the Times recently. I'd say a mix of everything.
I want to dive into specialisation and the importance of specialisation. And I don't know whether you realise you used the phrase that you dabbled in other bits and pieces as well. Don't know quite how many people would admit to enjoying financial remedy, but anyway, there is this drive, I suppose, in the law, and not just in family, in a range of disciplines, to be more specialised. You are recognised as a specialist yourself. Do you see that that's an important part of the progress of your career, and is it important for the profession as well?
I do. On both counts. I think it is really important. I think you mentioned this phrase before we started talking about jack of all trades, master of none. And I think that hits the nail on the head, really. I think that clients are far more sophisticated now than they were when I first started out. And I think people are looking for the best, especially in children cases, because the stakes are high and their children are the most important people in their lives. So I think for my area of the law, it is really important that we have experts, because the law is constantly evolving. It's very high profile. Cases go up to they start in the High Court, they can end up in the Court of Appeal and lawmaking in the Supreme Court. I think it's really important as well in terms of not just your legal knowledge, but your tactical and your practical advice, because that's quite often equally as important in terms of how you go about cases. I mean, I'm one of 49 in the entire country who specialises in international child abduction, and I can definitely say that is my unique selling point in terms of me and my practice. And what I see, very unfortunately, is that I quite often see a parent who will have gone to their high street practice and they would have taken some advice from someone who may be a family lawyer or somebody who does a bit of everything on a really complex cross-border dispute. And then they lose trust and confidence, and then they come to me, and then me and my team have to unravel it all. And it's difficult, really difficult, picking up a case halfway. I mean, for example, only a few weeks ago, I had somebody contact me to say that they were ready for final hearing, but they weren't sure that their lawyers were experts in this field, and they want to have change of legal representation. And quite often by that point, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
We can't pull a rabbit out of a hat. So I think it's really important that practitioners, we must advise our clients if it's outside of the scope of our competence and expertise. And there's no shame in that. I mean, I wouldn't, if somebody came to me now, and I've done divorce and finance, I've done public law for many years. Somebody came to me now and said, I really want you to act for me. I think you're amazing. And I really want you to act in my divorce. I would say no, because I've been out of practice for so long in that area of law. Actually, you should go and speak to my colleague or somebody else about this, who will be able to give you the service and the legal advice and the technical advice that you need. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it builds trust and confidence in us as a professional. I think that's really important. So I think that being an expert is definitely the way forward in terms of us being able to give our clients a good service, and in terms of us as lawyers being able to develop our knowledge and expertise to be able to deliver that service.
I guess family is probably quite fertile ground for specialisation, given it's such a wide and covers a huge array of issues in the law. I mean, for example, we're seeing a growing number of arbitrators, mediators, divorce coaches, etc. They, all entering the profession. Do you see this trend continuing?
I do, actually, because I think that not only in the legal field, you're right, you could be an expert in financial remedies, in public law. Even within public law, you can be an expert in certain types of public law proceeding, non-accidental injuries, or in terms of neglect cases, or acting for guardians. In the same way, I think that there is scope for there to be experts in terms of arbitrators, in terms of the type of cases you arbitrate on, mediators and counsellors. I mean, there is already a mediation service in my sector of the law that specialises in cross-border mediation alone, and even in respect of counsellors, because trauma is different. So I think there is definitely scope for this area of the law being specialist, for you having a specialism in family law and being able to carve that out as your niche.
And you describe yourself as being accredited, and obviously you've got your Law Society accreditation. Perhaps a bit of an existential question. I don't know. What role do you think that the regulators have in encouraging specialisation? I mean, if you look at, for example, residential conveyancing, you have the Council for Licensed Conveyancers, which is a dedicated regulator for that sector.
I think that training contracts are really important in this regard, and how they're regulated, because the traditional route is still there. I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years now. So when I qualified, it was exactly the same as it is now, that you do your training contract, you do different seats in different areas, which I think is great if you have someone who's coming out of law school who doesn't really know where they want to go and what they want to do in terms of their practice area. So I think that's great in terms of gaining exposure in different areas of the law. But there is so much competition now that a lot of aspiring lawyers are paralegal in different areas of the law, and they've already found their passion. And I think in those cases, there should be encouragement to allow them to focus and train in that one area. Now, I know that the SQE, I don't know much about it, but I understand that it's designed to help nurture that. But I also think that greater research needs to be done, and consideration needs to be given to, for example, tailored training contracts for someone who's already done lots of work experience, has worked in a role, to allow them to then just go into their niche. So, for example, in family law, you could have someone who could gain experience on all aspects of family alone, in terms of the divorce and finances, public law, and children. So if you've got a firm like ours where we are full service in family law, then actually a trainee could gain a vast amount of experience just in family alone, instead of having to then go to other areas of the firm to gain experience, especially if they know what they want to do at the end of it. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time for us and for them. But then the other thing is that I've been fortunate to have very good paralegals in my career, and I've invested a lot of time in my paralegals, in training them to a high standard. I think that greater consideration needs to be given to that, because if they want to stay in family, the groundwork is already there.
Yeah.
That investment's already taken place. So I think there needs to be some research into how lawyers are becoming lawyers and whether there needs to be some change there, because otherwise I just think it's just very outdated.
I think there's a huge role for the mentor-mentee kind of thing as well, isn't there? Like you say, you've invested a huge amount of time in staff that you're responsible for, perhaps in the same way that somebody invested that time in you when you were more junior and you were finding your own feet.
Absolutely. And I think we have a really important role in terms of being mentors, not just on the legal side, but in terms of well-being. I mean, I am big on kindness, and in terms of, I've been very fortunate that throughout my career, my training principal was incredibly kind and she invested a lot of time in me. And I think it's really important that we give that back. You hear a lot of things now about our profession, negative things. And I think that it's really important that even in terms of the juniors, the trainees, the paralegals, that we lead with kindness. And there is also importance paid on not just on giving them the legal expertise, but also, making sure that their well-being is being protected as well.
We've done a number of podcasts recently, and one of the things that seems to be a bit of a thread through them is the importance of educating both the profession and the wider public about the role of family lawyers in general, and something as specialist as you do, even more importantly so. How do people know to come to somebody like yourself in a case where there is a child abduction, international child abduction, for the sake of argument?
I think the internet plays a huge role in this. People Google everyone, everything, areas of law, information gathering. I think the internet plays a massive role in who people go to. I think social media has a huge impact as well, which is not something that we really had when I was first starting out. Mm-hmm. We were still sending post, for example. So I think social media has a massive impact. But I think that's more about how we market ourselves as lawyers in terms of our expertise. And it goes back to what I was saying about people with a complex case going to their local law firm because they think that that's their high street practice and they're going to know the answers to everything. So I think the onus is on us as well in accepting that, that we don't know the answer to everything, and we need to think about what we're competent in advising on. And if we're not, holding our hands up and saying, look, I think that you should go and consult an XYZ expert. So I think it works both ways. I think it's about how we market ourselves to the public, given that they're far more sophisticated now on social media and on the internet, and also on us as a profession as growing trust and confidence in people and having the power to say no. Instead of thinking, oh, this is a really interesting case, actually, I'm going to see if I can wing it and I'll instruct counsel and it'll all be fine. It's not fair.
I think in terms of educating the profession, that's massively important. I have conversations at the moment about the language of the law, and changing the way in which we conduct ourselves and some of our behaviors. There was a big LinkedIn thing I saw recently about dear sirs and changing the way in which we kind of come across as well as lawyers. And I think I really like that point that you've made about, look, we can't dabble. That time of dabbling, that time where the family lawyer or the lawyer could do a bit of this and a bit of that, do a few wills in the morning and do a divorce in the afternoon. That's kind of gone. We've got to stick in our lane because, as you say, ultimately, we've got to do the right thing for our clients.
And it's all about the public having trust and confidence in us as lawyers. It's about us being personable. It's about us being honest. It's about us having confidence in ourselves and our own abilities. In family law, it can become very complex. No case is the same. The issues are always different, and there is often always a complication. And I think it's really important that as a member of the public, if you need advice, that you properly vet your lawyer. And I constantly say that, even to people who instruct me, is that you've got to have trust and confidence in me. And if you are in discussions with someone else, properly vet them. That's fine. It's not a problem. If you want to vet 3 family lawyers, if you want to vet me and another child abduction lawyer, that is absolutely fine, because you have to have trust and confidence. It is a relationship, and you need to properly vet them yourself and make sure that you have the confidence in their abilities to represent you in the best way possible.
And ultimately, there's plenty of work to go around. There are always going to be family law issues.
Absolutely, there is plenty of work. As lawyers, we often worry about, where's our next case going to come from? And I do, even now. I'll have a quiet week when I don't have a hearing in my diary, and I think, it's gone very quiet. This is quite worrying. And I should know after 17 years that it's peaks and troughs, and there is always enough work. I've never had a year where I've not had enough work. There are 8 billion people in the world and 220,000 solicitors registered in England. So for my line of work, where my audience is the world, there is always going to be plenty of work. And I think that goes for anyone. We all need a lawyer, not necessarily a family lawyer. We might need a lawyer because we've been in an accident. We might need a lawyer because we need a will. We might be buying or selling a house. We always need a lawyer in our lives. And I think that there is always going to be plenty of work for everybody.
I didn't necessarily want to go into a lot of detail about your work. I suspect that some of it is obviously very specialist, and understandably some of it will also be very confidential. But I think broadly kind of exploring the importance of specialisation, how you came to be a specialist, and the importance that people have played in that journey for you has made for a really interesting discussion, Kim. So I really, really appreciate you joining the podcast. Thanks very much indeed.
You're welcome.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk. My thanks to Kim. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.